Hey everyone, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today we're going to talk about the Fun from Burson Audio. It is a very interesting amp for headphones, of course. So I just want to start out with the basics. It's a $300 amp in its base form. You can get it on Burson Audio's website. I'll have a link in the description below, and then you can also buy them on Amazon. Now, Burson Audio is an Australian company. It's a flat rate shipping of $55 regardless of which product you pick. So factor that into the cost too, of course. And then you can get bundles with op amps. Now I'll talk about the op amps in a moment, but basically the real kicker to the fun is you can roll or change the op amps, which can customize your sound. It is noticeable. So to me, if you like to tinker with things, or if you're looking for a second amp and you already have your reference bass amp and you just want something, I told myself I wouldn't be using Fun outside of the model name, but if you want something fun to play with, this is something cool and different and innovative to, start off on your more DIY / tinkering journey. They do have some cool DIY kits on the site. I actually think these guys are cool because they're audio geeks. They make some really cool stuff to customize computer sound cards. They make all kinds of products. They make some really expensive, $2,000 plus equipment too, like whether you're looking at headphone amps or DACs. So the Fun is one of their less expensive products. It might be one of their least expensive, actually. But what's really interesting, if you're a computer geek, you may think the shape looks oddly familiar, and that's because it's the same size as a 5¼ inch CD-ROM drive that you would put on a desktop. And just to take things further, check out the back. That is a Molex input. So if you wanted something, this is a very unique product just for that alone. There's even the screw holes on the side to mount on the rail inside a computer case. So if you're looking for something innovative, this can go inside your computer case, and it actually has a microphone pass-through. So let's just do the nerdy stuff right off the bat. There's microphone and aux. I tested all that stuff, and if you're using this as a standalone amp and it's sitting on your desk, and then you take the back microphone output, that little 3.5 millimeter, then connect it to the line in on your sound card, plug a headset into the front with the Y adapter and all that good stuff, there is some ground loop buzzing, if you will. Because you have two different power supplies being involved on the same audio source, the ground loop noise is only on the microphone side. It didn't affect the sound quality, and if it did, it was minor, at least in my setup. But when I did audio recording tests, there was a noticeable hum. Now, that won't be an issue if the sole power supply is hooked up to the back via the Molex, and then the aux that's coming out, or the microphone pass-through, is going into the sound card that's also built into the computer. And when I say the sound card, the way these plugs are, so what's interesting is this uses RCAs and not like an HD audio plug that would connect to the motherboard. They don't give you that option. And so you're basically taking a Y adapter that does the dual RCA, running it through the back of your case and then into the back of the sound card through the headphone output. That's if you don't want to use an external DAC. So if you're using a built-in sound card and using the DAC that comes with your computer, which some are okay. Some gaming motherboards have like ESS Saber DACs, for example. But if you do all that and then you run a 3.5 millimeter TRS on both sides to the microphone in on the back of the sound card, you can technically use this as a super powerful amp for headphones with mics. And then this little aux input will disable the rear RCA input, so you can plug like a phone source into this, for example, or any other aux device in case you don't want to use the input coming in the back. So I thought that was cool. It's something. I told myself I wasn't going to use Fun. It's something fun, I guess. So anyway, so the other RCA that you see is pass-through. If you're concerned with, connecting several devices together, this does use the volume knob as a adjustment for the pre-out. There's no way to disable that. It's not a fixed line out. So if you wanted to use this as a preamp because you have the op amp rolling where you can customize the sound a little bit, you can then run the RCAs back out to a speaker amplifier, for example, and then use this as your preamp stage, and just to play with the sound a little bit more. So with that being said, let's talk about the sound quality. And this uses their high current power supply. It's basically, it runs at 170,000 hertz. So the idea of that is to have a very low noise floor. So when you have the volume turned up and the source is silent, you shouldn't really hear any hiss or hum. Now this actually measured surprisingly well. I know there's some tests online that did the amp benchmarks to look at SYNAD, which is your signal to noise ratio and distortion, and also the output stage, of course. If I do want to nitpick something, or I guess, so the output impedance is 6 ohms. Not great if you're trying to drive IEMs or 16 ohm headphones. It really skirts the line for being optimal for a 32 ohm headphone. Anything above 32 ohm, this will be fine. And I actually did drive multiple 32 ohm headphones. I just reviewed the VZR Model 1 gaming headset. It's an audiophile closed back gaming headset. And because that worked perfectly with the mic pass-through. And that one, it still sounded excellent. I got great imaging out of it, but it really pushes it as far as the output impedance load compared to the input or the nominal impedance of that headset. So if you have higher impedance headphones or a lot of varying headphones out there, I wouldn't really recommend this for IEMs, but for all of the headphones, it's great. Now this is a dual mono Class A amp, which means it's got some serious liveliness to the music. It really does sound incredible. And I was concerned about heat. It really doesn't it gets warmer than my THX amp, of course, but it wasn't so hot that I couldn't put other components on top. It felt warm to the touch, but never hot. I've had other amps in the past that get noticeably warmer than this. So it's not too bad, even though it's Class A. And then at 32 ohms, it's rated at 2.1 watts, which is pretty immense. And then if you go all the way up to the 300 ohm load, it's still 0.33 watts or 330 milliwatts. So the power output at this price point is comparable to the best as far as competition goes. So if you're concerned with just a lot of juice, this is definitely going to give you that. So I'm trying to think. Let's talk about the op amps first. So the idea of this is Burson Audio gives you an Allen key. It's a 2.5 millimeter hex. You can remove the top two in the front and the top two in the rear, and then the lid comes off, and you can swap out both of the op amps. Now the op amps are single op amps. They're not dual. So if you're buying different op amps on your own online, do not buy the dual op amps. Just get the single channel, because you don't have, it's basically one per channel. So you don't, otherwise it won't be compatible and you'll likely burn out the op amp. Now this comes with two JRC 55340 op amps installed. Fairly inexpensive op amp. I think they're only a few dollars online if you want to replace them yourself. But they have a fairly neutral sound. They're not doing anything too exciting to the sound. I'll describe the sound characteristics in a moment. But anyway, that's what's included. They're very small and there's no heatsink on them or anything like that. Now, a popular third-party op amp is the Sparkos SX3601. I think they're $40 each right now. So not cheap, but they are a very good, high-performing op amp. And again, get the single. Everything you look at, make sure it says single, not dual. But then you could do the Burr Brown DACs. You can mess around and look at some kits online and just kind of experiment with it. So to me, honestly, just to get to the point on this part, I think what makes the Fun a great amp to buy, it may not be the only amp for you. I think this is an amazing second or third amp if you have like a reference or baseline amp. And I'm not saying that to knock this in any way. You'll find out why I'm saying this in a moment. But when you start playing around with op amps, you can really change the output and the color of the sound that this puts out. And it does make it really fun to listen to music that way. It kind of just wakens it up or smooths it out, whatever you're looking for. So whether you're getting using the one that it comes with, they're upgrading, or they have their own kits. So they have the V6 Vivid, which is what I have installed in here right now. It's $85 for a pair. They have the V6 Classics, the V5Is, V5s, etc. They all have their own unique properties, and so I on certain tracks I actually liked the included cheap op amp better, just the basic one that it comes with, because it's a little bit more vintagey sounding. It has a slight emphasis in the low mids to upper bass, or upper bass to low mid region. It's just a tad warm, but it still has amazing separation and imaging. Again, just because it's an inexpensive op amp doesn't mean it's garbage. it's still better than what a lot of other devices ship with. Now, the primary headphone I used when testing the Fun was the HiFiMan Aria Stealth open back planar magnetic. The Stealth magnet is a very smooth, very neutral sounding headphone. If you EQ it to have a lot of bass, it'll deliver it. If you want it to sound sharper and brighter, it'll do that too. So I wanted something as flat as I could that wouldn't color the output of the amp. And to me, the Stealth is one of the best headphones I've used for measuring that. So all of my feedback is based off of what I'm hearing on this headphone. If I were to describe that sound, it's kind of like when I was younger and you heard a great sound system. I didn't know everything about, and I don't know everything now, but I didn't know as much about the whole audiophile scene and all these specs and measurements and stuff like that. I just turned up the sound system, and to me at the time it sounded great, and I just enjoyed listening to music. And to me, that's what the bass op amp sounds like. It's not overly analytical sounding. It's not overly bright or detailed or anything like that. There's not a lot of slam to the bass. It's not doing a lot to it. But it doesn't sound digital or like a single chip is powering it either. And I think some people out there, they may know what I'm talking about. When you hook up to a $100 headphone amp DAC combo, it still sounds fairly digital and processed. You turn it up, it doesn't have like a lot of life to it. Now, part of why this sounds so good is because it has a Class A amp, and honestly, that's making a massive difference. But it still sounds special without being overly analytical, if that makes sense. What I noticed with the V6 Vivid when I swapped them out, the names that they pick are pretty smart. Fun is fun to play with. Vivid is a definitely more vivid sounding op amp. And what I like about that one is there are certain songs where you start getting more, unique details and imaging that I didn't get with the included op amp. And it really, on certain like jazz tracks, like an older recording that can sound kind of dull but naturally has a warmer tone to it, like the track is kind of bass heavy, fairly smooth up top, the Vivid just kind of makes it feel more like a live presentation of the music. And it made it really, really awesome to listen to. I mean, I listened to the same tracks over and over, and I left the lid off. That way I can power it down, switch out the op amps, go back to the included ones. And some tracks I just was floored at how much detail and presentation of the music. The music sings on the Vivid. And I guess if I were to use an analogy, you go to a wedding or some big formal event and you show up in a suit and a tie. And then the night goes on a little bit, you start having a good time, and all of a sudden the tie's off, you unbutton the top collar. I think a lot of people know what I'm talking about, and you're just having a good time. I think this is the equivalent of like taking the tie off. It's not being as reserved, it's just having a blast. And overall, it made it really fun and intriguing to listen to music that way. Now, there are times where I hear a more complex, whether it's a poorly recorded track or just a very busy track. You listen to a song from Chevelle, a more recent rock group. Some of their tracks can get very busy and bright. And when you combine that with the Vivid, it can be almost too much. So I actually preferred the stock op amp more for stuff like that. And even though the V6 Vivids do, I think, impact the highs more than anything else, they actually did impact the bass a little bit for me. The stock op amp has a slightly harder bass that's more focused on the mid-range, mid to high level bass. Just a little bit more bold, whereas the Vivid kind of took that edge off just a little bit, smoothed out the bass just a little, but with a little bit more emphasis. I guess it seems more emphasis on the lower bass, more of a thunderous rumble type bass than the harder hitting tight bass that you get on the stock op amp. And it just might be simply because it's pulling that down a little, that the low bass seems to be stronger. But I don't want to say it creates a V because I don't think it does. I do think that the Vivid can make some of the mid-range sound a little bit more hollow or shallow, whereas the stock one had a warmer sound to it in the mids. And I'm assuming, and from what I've read, the classics do a better job in the mid-range. It's really just preference, and that's really kind of where I want to wrap up with this. To me, this amp isn't all about every single spec and measurement. It actually does measure surprisingly well, considering the design with swappable op amps, and I honestly expect it to be a little bit lower of a performer, even with the 6 ohm output impedance. However, when you actually just listen to it and just stop worrying about all the specs and you start playing music, it's just a blast to listen to, and it sounds like nothing I have right now. And that's whether I used it straight to my computer sound card, I used a JDS Atom DAC, which is a $100 DAC, and I used the Denafrips Aries 2, which is a $900 R2R DAC. There's a lot of versatility with something like this, and I think it makes it, it just gives you something new to do with your music and your headphones, and you can kind of experience things in a new way while still having a lot of output power. So this is a very flexible amp as far as your higher end, larger headphones, and it does a great job, especially at the price point. So without overcomplicating it, would I buy this as my only single amp? Probably not, only because if I only had one amp, I would want something to support IEMs, I would want a balanced connection, etc. And you can get that in this price range. However, those are very neutral sounding typically. This is kind of just a different approach where it's not giving you every single connection type. The output impedance isn't half an ohm or anything. But when you go past that and just plug in a pair of headphones that you're familiar with, it's like listening to a new pair. And I think that's what makes the Fun special. So surprisingly, I actually love using this thing. It's just more fun for me for listening to music. It really does wake things up. And damn it, I use Fun again. So anyway, that about wraps up the review. I hope you found this helpful in covering the nature and characteristics of the Fun and what makes it so cool. Oh, and the last thing, that volume knob, it feels amazing in hand. It actually has quite a bit of resistance to it. And it doesn't quite slip out of your hands or anything like that, but the quality of the knob feels excellent. They have a really nice potentiometer on there. There's not really much channel imbalance either. It's a fixed gain, and as soon as you start getting audible music, it does favor one channel over the other, but it's only for that first like 1%. Overall, the pot's still good though. I had no channel imbalance issues at a volume to actually listen to music at. So I do like this thing. I hope you found this review helpful, and if you have any questions, shoot me a comment below. Thank you again so much for the support. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And with that being said, I'll see you next time.